Live, audio is live, Chair.
All right. Welcome everybody to the February meeting of the Administration and Public Works Committee. Let's do a roll call.
Farmer,
Here.
Vice Chair Edens. Here. Councilmember Gross. Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Albers.
Here.
Councilmember Nyan, it will be coming, and Councilmember Jackson.
Here, ma'am. Okay, looks like we've got enough people this month to get started, so that's a good thing. That brings us to the approval of minutes for the December and our very abbreviated January meeting. So if anybody would care to make a motion to approve the minutes or have any questions or concerns, we can
Do both together.
do them both together.
I move that we accept the minutes as presented for both the December and January meeting.
All right, motion made, seconded by Mr. Albers. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstention? Okay, minutes are approved. That brings us to our public participation. I know that we've got a couple guests in the room. I assume you guys would like to participate. You're here frequently, so you know the drill, but let's try to keep it contained and brief and we'll get going. So if we got a speaker card, we can start.
First, we have Vicky Roboleski.
How many minutes is the speaking in this meeting?
5.
5? We didn't know if it was 3 or 5.
Yeah.
You're thinking of planning and zoning with 3?
I'm Vicky Roboleski, 17227 Windsor Crest. I'm the president of the board of directors for the Homeowners Association. And I just wanted to expand on Mr. Brown's memo to the committee. Alleys in town center have been a topic of conversation for many years. My involvement began 3 years ago when I became president of our Homeowners Association. And I called the city innocently asking when our alleys would be approved as public based on the ordinance 2628 that was passed in August of 2021. I was told the alleys were not a part of the policy on the dedication of streets and would not be dedicated. We then spent about a year getting wording added and approved by city council to add the alleys. At which point we submitted our petition for dedication and were told through the report process that our alleys were considered secondary access to our homes, which we strongly disagree. The only access to our driveways and garages is through our alleys, which means for us that they are primary access. And the second piece was condition, which was also mentioned. The age of our alleys was known to Vince Loyal, to city staff and city council when the ordinance was passed in August of 2021. It included that existing private alleys within town center would become public and all future alleys would be platted as public, period. The same ordinance was used last month in Bill 2953 for the dedication of Main Street Crossing. Our main issues are that the ordinance is not being put into effect for Windsor Crest and that the policy for the dedication of streets and alleys is not being followed for other streets being dedicated in Wildwood. For example, Evergreen Forest did not meet criteria, and we were told by the city that they did not realize the condition until after they were dedicated. The subdivision contribution was minimal compared to the approximately $500,000 spent. Center Avenue did not meet policy criteria and is being paved twice. Understand the builders paid to have it done and then they'll be close to $1 million spent by the time it's finished when they're redone in the spring. Crestview has already had $1 million budgeted and it does not meet policy criteria. For us, Windsor Crest alleys were built to city specifications 20 years ago with stormwater drainage, signage, and thickness of pavement, etc. They meet policy criteria, but they're older. The policy has not been followed and precedents have been set with other streets. We've been told by multiple sources that we should continue to share concerns, and we've offered options to bring this to closure with no response. We would appreciate your assistance in taking Windsor Crest dedication seriously and move the bill forward for dedication and approval. Thank you for your time.
Next, we have Jim Van Nest.
I'm Jim Van Nest, 17133 Windsor Crest. 3 years ago, Vicky became president. Well, 12 of the 15 years before I was president. And there's a misnomer that we're asking the city to take our alleys. It was quite the opposite. The city contacted me asking us to give them the alleys. I spoke at the April 9th, 2019 meeting of the Town Center Update Committee, which is in the minutes, you can see about it. So 6 years ago, our alleys were in better shape, but it's been kicking around for 6 years now. But it was Vince Loyal who contacted me and asked me to come and ask us to pledge to turn our alleys over to the city. Now, Windsor Crest has a long history of partnership with the city. We've had 3 previous ordinances for Windsor Crest only. The first one was when Town Center was being built and they started the streetlights. They contacted me and wanted to accept our streetlights in Windsor Crest since they were we're in Town Center and they were Town Center streetlights. So we gave the Town Center streetlights to the city. The second one is we're gonna put a trail into the community park. And the lakes in the community park was property owned or handed by Windsor Crest. When the subdivision was built, McBride worked with the Snyder sisters who owned a private property previously. And the lakes and the property around them were ours. We insured them, we cut them, we did everything. Well, when they decided to put the trail from the bicycle bridge over 109 down into the community park, Joe Vonage came to me and said, listen, we need to go across your property. So we signed the documents, got the ordinance, and we gave the lakes and the property, everything to the city. And at the end, we didn't have to cut the grass anymore, but that they could not put the trails in across our property without our permission. Then the last time they widened 109, put the bridge in, put the roundabouts in. We granted them access to put an entrance into our subdivision across our common ground. And the other thing, we pledged to take care of all of the ground in front of Windsor Crest, which is not our property. It's all highway right of way and controlled by City of Wildwood. In return, the City of Wildwood did cost studies and found out that if we maintained everything, mulched the beds, replaced the bushes, cut everything, and irrigated everything, they would snow plow our alleys. And it was like 3-to-1 savings for the city because we only get snow plowed if there's snow. So that was another ordinance that we agreed to. So we've been on the partners with Wildwood all along. It looks like Windsor Crest is getting everything, but in each case, it was studied by Wildwood and found to be Wildwood's advantage. So we just think this is one more time that they should just give us a break and get this over with. But that's the history of the city with it, and we are also the only subdivision with all alley access. The other subdivisions, Main Street Crossing, Cherry Hills, have some houses on streets and some houses on alley. We're all alleys, so that's why Vicky's saying our alleys are our primary access. Every time I go to and from my house, it's out the alley. So to say that they don't count as primary access doesn't really work in the practicality. So we just want help and we want to get done, you know? And we hear from all of the residents in the subdivision, what's going on with the alleys? And we keep saying, I don't know, you know? So we'd appreciate some help and especially moving it forward. I'd also like to congratulate Vicky that she's running for council and she's running unopposed. So she will probably be with you people come May, I guess, if you accept the new appointees. So that's all we're here for. Yes, we're repeating ourselves, but the only reason we're repeating ourselves is it's been going on for 6 years. You know, I guarantee you, if you would have taken them 6 years ago, you'd have never seen us again. But all we can do is just keep making the good fight. So thank you.
All right. I assume there's no other public comment. Is there, whoever's online, is that
Any participants with their hand raised? There you go.
Nathan's up there?
He's Did you
Okay.
put on the panel?
Well, then we will move past,
Excuse me, could I say one more thing?
sure.
I forgot to point out that if the city takes the alleys, like there's been 4 subdivisions in the town center. They've taken 3 of them, but in all of those, they have to accept the expense of snow plowing the alleys. Where ours are already being paid for by the city, so there's no expense for that aspect.
All right. Okay, for our public works session, section under for information, we don't have anything. Our first for action item is the consideration of the policy on the public dedication of private streets or alleys. Rick, I assume that's you or Tom?
Ready to start off with it?
Start it off and I'll, add to it.
Thank you, Chair, council members. Heard some comment about policy. We have had a policy in place for the public dedication of private streets since 2001. It's been amended at least a couple times in the following years, most recently has been stated in 2023. This has been a discussion that's been ongoing in front of the city council for literally decades relative to how do we address requests to publicly dedicate private streets. Alleys are just a recent chapter in that whole phenomenon, that whole discussion. In 2023, we did amend the policy with the intent to allow alleys within the town center to be included for public dedication. That was a result of the update of the master plan and the recommendation that came out of that practice. The main key that I think needs to be clear is we've always had an inspection component in the policy that was in place, and that dates all the way back, I believe, to the initial policy. The intent, from my understanding, was that we wanted to bring in streets that met our standard, and it did not result in the cities being in a position to spend a significant amount of funds to bring them up to our standard. Whether that was a private street or now more recently an alley. So that is a component of the policy, is that we do have an inspection component. So when the request comes in, the street superintendent will go out and make an inspection of the street, or in this case, the alley, and come up with a list of deficiencies that need to be corrected to bring the street or alley up to our current standard. That was done in this place for Windsor Crest. We did provide a document that summarized the deficiencies that were found with the alleys that was provided to the representatives, the trustees with the subdivision. A main note of the corrections that were found was the need to resurface the alley. The alley is never, to my knowledge, been overlaid or resurfaced. We did go in the main streets and in the subdivision resurfaced them probably 5 years ago. So they are lacking in that regard, and that was probably the main item that we found in our inspection. It was then in accordance with the policy provided to them in the inspection report. And the way the policy is written that we have in place is they're supposed to make the corrections to bring the street or alley up to the standard. Once that is agreed to be done, it then goes to city council to essentially consummate the transfer. So at this point, we've provided that information to the HOA. We've met with them. Thomas can talk more about this. We've provided additional information to them relative to cost to address the deficiencies. But to my knowledge, none of the repairs have been addressed at this point in time. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is the deficiencies have been provided to the HOA and the corrections have not been made as were requested in the report. I think with that, I will turn it over to the city administrator if he wants to add any additional comments.
Yes, with your permission, Chair. Sure. Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to add a couple notes here. Seeing this policy at work over the last year, we've had the Meadows accepted, and also we just had Main Street Crossing accepted. They went through the exact same process where the inspection was conducted on both streets, and for Main Street, they came back for the alleys. Both inspections came back up to city standard. Those were then brought to the city council and then subsequently publicly accepted. So in that case, those have been done. The main piece here is to consider, and the reason why the policy is written the way it is so that there isn't an undue expense that's added directly on to the plate of the city. So say we were to accept these alleys the next day, I would assume, or within a very quick amount of time, a resident could theoretically call and say, hey, this alley needs to be resurfaced. And in that case, we would owe it to the resident to get it done if it was owned by the city. So the idea behind this policy, and it's something that we wanted to bring up in case we wanted to consider options, and we'll provide a couple branches here, but were to have the repairs done beforehand so you can work it into our traditional construction schedule, into our capital improvement plan. In this case, per the policy, this can't be considered until it's brought up to the standard. That said, we put the code, the policy up to date today, and you can take a look. It was most recently amended in June of 2023. That said, the main piece that we're looking at here that is under the policy is that after the city would receive the actual petition itself, and inspections conducted and deficiencies are addressed by the person who is requesting the improvement. At that point, it then goes to city council for consideration. City council still does have the ability to decline at any point because it is a transfer of property. That said, that portion of the policy would have to be amended, and that could lead to, for our town center, any private parcel that comes in to street or alley, it could be any shape in our town center would be able to come in and just make the request, and the city council would have to consider it immediately. So this was kind of done to protect those initial repairs so it could be worked into a schedule and make sure it was brought up to the standards. But the department is available for any questions.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm understanding this. So I appreciate you guys coming out and talking. Obviously, we see you guys a lot. We're well versed. We're not, in this conversation, we're not having a specific conversation about these alleys. This is about the policy in general.
Yeah.
Okay, and the question that you're asking us is, do we feel like we want to change the policy that is currently in place, that we go through whatever, they get petitions and people sign stuff and then we do a thing, all that?
Yep.
Do we want to change that or not?
That's correct. And the reason why, Chair, just because the fact is the staff has to go by the policy. This
Sure.
directs our day-to-day operation. It gives us guidance, on our process. So in order for us to to vary away from the actual policy itself, we would need guidance and direction from the council.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Okay, so I have a separate question about one issue and then a statement on the policy. So in general, policy can be the policy, and I'm okay with it. But in resolving an ongoing issue where it sounds like we may have had some sort of verbal agreement, a horse trade, if you will, help us maintain property in lieu of us coming in and, resurfacing, then we might need to somehow maybe look at making an exception. But I know I have a lot of folks in rural areas that I have this conversation all the time on private streets. Will you please take over our private street? And they don't meet the dedication. It's not the same as an alley, but it's so I also don't want to set a precedent that, I would then have to live up to, which we can't afford on my own streets in Ward 2. And I'm not trying to open that can of worms. I'm just trying to resolve an ongoing issue without creating more problems. And so if we have over the years through different administrations made promises that we didn't keep and had a double standard, then I feel like there's a way to resolve that separately than changing the policy on the books. Because we've already made other exceptions over the years for other projects.
Okay, anybody else?
Does anything have to be prepared before we would agree to take them over?
Yes,
Well, I don't know that I'm the person that should be saying these kinds of things. I'm not the greatest at the Robert's Rules deal, but I think we want to focus on the policy part first, and then I think we can address this, but I don't want to get yelled at by the lawyer police about how we're going about this. Am I saying that correctly?
But is there anything that's preventing us from taking over the streets? Is that a better question?
I think the question, I think the question maybe is, so what I'm hearing, please tell me if I'm wrong, is these guys have jumped through 3 of the 4 hoops necessary, I suppose, to whatever 2 of the 3. They petitioned the city, they got their signatures. We went out and did our inspection. We found some things that weren't quite right. How not quite right are we? Are we talking about fixing a couple things, or are we talking about?
I can provide a little context here, the chair, to you, Chair, and the committee. So we did hear from, in this case, the individuals that are looking to have it accepted, and we wanted to see if, you know, the city, if we were to do it, could we get it at a better price to bring it up to standard? And we went out from MB West, was the contractor we got a quote for, and it was about $137,000 in repairs that would need to be performed in order for us to bring it up to the standards and address the deficiencies listed in the inspection report. So that was the kind of the last little bit.
Okay. That sounds like a lot. Yes, sir.
So in keeping with the discussion of policy, I would agree with Ms. Edens. I'm not sure that I'm a fan of changing the policy. I think it's absolutely important that the city sets standards before taking over streets. I couldn't have said it better. I get this call probably once every couple of months about, I want my street in Ward 6 taken over by the city. I guess one question I do have about the policy, do alleys and streets get the same treatment? In other words, does an alley have to make the same standard as a street?
And I can let the Director of Public Works speak to the specific standard. I don't believe that's the case, but if it's something where this alley hasn't been resurfaced for a good deal of time, typically about 7 years, is you want to resurface a road or alley, depending on usage, at least that frequent. It really kind of defers more to our street standards within our code. But when it comes to alleys versus the streets, I mean, I think he might be the right person to speak to it, but.
Well, maybe a secondary question is whether they are or aren't thought of separately. Should they be or should they not be? I mean, I know that there's some debate about whether these are secondary entrances or primary entrances or whatever, but I mean, I assume much like a sidewalk or anything else, we have a certain level of standards that just is.
I think relative to the discussion with the alley, clearly an alley is not a road, so there would be some features if we were looking at it, that might be constructed differently, but we would acknowledge. But the key here is the age of the alley and the condition of the pavement. The condition of the asphalt in the alley is poor and it's not near what we would accept with a new street by any stretch. Again, I referenced, we overlaid our streets in that subdivision probably 5 years ago because they needed it. Unfortunately, alleys have not seen that same level of attention. They need to be overlaid. I don't believe that's occurred since their construction, which was maybe not quite 20 years ago, but it's been many years. So it's really the condition that they're currently in. And Scott, almost streets are protection. He goes out and he will drive it and make notes relative to those very things, the condition of it, any damage that needs to be repaired. And if it was a full street, it might trigger looking at curbs. There's no
I guess
curbs necessary.
Maybe Rob, correct me
Here,
if I'm
signs,
wrong.
things like that.
I think the question maybe is, are we applying a set of standards to the alleys that might be inappropriate because it's what we would apply to a street? And so maybe that high bar isn't necessary, or, you know, if the asphalt is failing, it is failing. I mean, there's nothing, I mean, it just is. I guess you're trying to ask like,
No,
we're not
and I-
making something more than it needs to be.
Right, so yes and no. So if we require streets to have cement curbs, but we don't require alleys to have cement curbs, okay, that's a difference. But as I think I'm hearing you say, at the end of the day, in this particular case, it is the quality of the asphalt.
And the policy does specify within our code between street and alley. So you would refer back into the code to what an alley is and what a street is. So you're not having whatever we have in our code, which I'm looking up now to give you the specifics, but the street and alleys are treated independently. They would
Got it.
and held to their own standard, but really in this case,
We apply the alley standard.
we apply the alley standard.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Marshall.
So years ago, it was trash trucks on these alleys. The weight was a challenge. So when they were building the subdivisions, they were told that those streets had to be brought up to code because of the weight of the trash trucks and that kind of stuff. Again, that was a long time ago. I don't know how, I remember all of these. I remember us bringing streets in all over the city. But they had to bring the street up to our acceptable standard before we'd even bring it in. And most people looked at it and said, we can't afford to do that. So they continue to be private roads. From a town center standpoint, that whole issue got shifted in 2019 when they said, this is what we want to do in the town center issue. Whether we agree or not, that was brought forward by that committee and then the council accepted that. So I think there's some implied responsibility for everyone in doing that. I don't understand, and I didn't then, and I, had homeowners here, Evergreen. That was always a private street. And when I was mayor walking around, you can't be in here, these are all private streets. And suddenly, we put hundreds of thousands of dollars in there a couple of years ago. I went to ward meetings, but I never had anyone say, these people signing everything over, we did all the curbs over, we did all the streets over, and now they're all tickled to death. But how did that happen? And then how did Center, is it Center or East? It's Center.
Center.
How did that go from us really not having any discussions to suddenly hundreds of thousands of dollars? And so it's just the inconsistency. I particularly think we shouldn't do any private alleys, especially when somebody's building a new development. Build everything to code, because within 10 years, they're gonna be back in here saying, hey, you have to help us. And then it becomes a political issue. Have them build it to code, no private alleys accepted in town center, and then move on. It just seems that we're constantly dealing with stuff that it's kind of self-inflicted. We're the ones that made these rules, and then we're trying to figure out, oh, we don't want to do that. A lot of people couldn't bring their streets up, and some did. Some went in and they did all the work and they brought their streets up because they didn't want the long-term maintenance of it.
Right.
We're already plowing the street. So I mean, that just even makes it worse. So what happens if our plow tears it up?
Right.
So I just think it's one of those issues that we really need to deal with two different issues. One's a policy, and the other one is, how do you make something right that over a period of years, we've continued to kind of step in it and make it even more of a challenge. And it is a lot of money, but so was Evergreen, so is these others. And they're not in town center.
Right.
Well, actually, East is, right?
Center is.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take a page out of your book, I think.
Okay.
I'm sitting here doing math, right? Cause you do that all the time. Tom, you said 140,000 was the quote?
Yeah, 100, they're right around that, 137.5.
Okay, and I'm counting 75 homes in Windsor Crest, give or take, 77. Oh, that is what I
Let's
got.
give just a little more.
Right, so that's a little less than
And everybody
$1,900
has
a
an
home.
alley, right? All the houses in Windsor Crest have alleys. I mean, they're all,
Every house backs to an alley.
Yeah, the alley goes around, it looks like all of the outer homes, and then there's one down the center.
We are the last alleys in town center.
Yeah.
There are no more in the future.
And that begs another question, why are we plowing their alleys? Did we do everyone's alleys?
No, it was a trade because we're taking care of all the ground that belongs to the city.
yeah,
So
so.
it was a trade.
Okay,
I mean, I could be wrong. Please correct me if I am, but I am thinking about this with stuff I have in West Glen Farms as a trustee, which is a little bit different than what I have as a councilman. And so, like, I have a super expensive pond that I would love to give to the city for free. I will pay them to have it.
No, thank you.
But even mow it before you
Yeah,
get to
I'll cut it one last time, but it sounds like with a lot of the arrangements and things, a lot of these things were, at the end of the day, I think I would describe them probably as mutually beneficial. There was we do this, they do that, it's a back and a forth. So the plowing grade seems to me like an odd trade to make, but whatever. I think I know where you're going with
Yeah.
this, so you can continue with your man.
well, I was just gonna say, I mean, I'm a fan of keeping the policy in place. I think we have to have the policy, but I'm also a fan of us following the policy and doing it correctly to the best of our ability. I don't know where we go with your issue specifically, but I know that to do the same thing with my street in my neighborhood, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars per home. And so when I see the $2,000 per home, if that's what it would take to get the alley up to speed to help the city dedicate it, I'm not sure that that's a price that I wouldn't be willing to pay as a resident now. But I'm taking that in context of what I'm facing in my own area, right? So, I don't know, but I'm not a fan of changing the policy.
My parents are on a currently private road. That's what I grew up on. And when they redid theirs, I think it was $12,000 a house.
Yeah.
So it's It
It's
is allowed.
painful.
So,
But I made that decision,
Right,
right? And they made decisions and there have been conversations in between, and that's really where the rub lies.
so I'm wondering if maybe the best course of action, just to make sure, I think at the end of the day, what we're trying to do with this and with a bunch of stuff, and Vicky, when you join us here in a couple months, I hope that you'll find the same process. What we are really striving for is to get the processes that we're using as a city consistently applied across the board. And sometimes that makes residents unhappy, and sometimes that makes the city unhappy. And I've gotten to the point where if everyone is unhappy, that's usually the best answer, because that's just kind of how it goes. So my suggestion would be to kind of keep going here on our agenda is if the consensus, if somebody wants to, I guess you want to get a motion, right, on that the policy is the policy, we're gonna not suggest to change that.
Yeah.
Right? So we'll do this as kind of a two-part thing, would be my suggestion. If somebody wants to make a motion about the policy being the policy, and we can move that part forward. And then I think we can maybe give some more instruction to Rick or Tom or whomever to help us better understand what the deal was in Evergreen and some of these other places, so that we can actually lay this stuff out and see what it is and figure it out. I'm along the lines of you, Mr. Jaxie, I'm looking at like, a special assessment to get something up to speed, to not have to take care of it. Is there a middle ground? I don't know. But, I know I personally get tired of beating the same dead horse over and over again, but I'd like to just
Get
kind
off
of
the
get
horse.
it. Yeah, I'd like to
Yeah.
try to get this thing solved.
There's no problem with the policy. The policy's been worked the last few years. We're,
Well,
changing the
but I
policy.
think the policy part is,
The problem is you don't follow it.
well, but the policy part is, if the policy is that the roads have to be up to a certain standard.
Right. Crestview does not. Center Avenue is not,
So that's the part we need to figure out.
because you're doing it anyway.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Hopper, what you got?
Sorry, it's a couple points back, but I think just for clarification on this, as we're discussing the policy itself and what that is, the question around the difference between streets and alleys. So as we get through this, is that clearly defined in the policy? And do we have this, I think somebody mentioned that too, do we have a set of standards that are clearly defined for street versus alley if we're going to do that? Because I didn't quite catch it, so I guess I wasn't really sure that the language was there. And if it is not, I guess that would be a change I would make, that if we're going to have those in there, then we need to have it clearly defined one or the other.
Tom's going to look that up to make sure that what he's saying is correct. While you're doing that, you got anything else?
That was the big thing I have, and I back everybody else. We need to have a policy in place. We need to follow the policy. And if it is something outside of that, obviously there's a lot that's been going on. I don't really care for the term, but handshake deals that are happening between the city and residents and stuff to take care of these kind of things. Like, we just need to get to the bottom of those, figure out what's going on, and make good on any promises that we would have made, but definitely have a clear understanding going forward that this policy is here for a reason and we just need to follow it, not do a lot of the other stuff.
Right. Yes, sir.
Was there any, I'm not aware of the history, was there any plowing done by the city along the history of your subdivision?
They've been plowing for the last 5 or 6 years.
Once they did the.
Probably the city's salt is what's deteriorating our alleys. No,
And that started.
prior to that, we paid for it to be plowed.
Yeah.
And the plowing started
When we took over the common ground.
one of these handshake agreements
It
or.
was an ordinance. I mean,
It's
it was-
actually an ordinance with an agreement.
It's all legal, and
Okay.
they found out that our cutting is like 4 times the price of your plowing.
I
So
got
the
it.
city was happy to do it.
Okay,
So in this policy, there is under section 2 on the last page, talking about, and so the question is, it's a city policy, not necessarily just town center. But then it specifically comes back and says, except if located within suburban residential area or town center and built to an equivalent standard of the connecting public street. So, yeah, so I mean, it's kind of messy there too. You say, well, so if the whole thing came back in 2019 on the town center plan, which was where a lot of this stuff was pulled forward, then that's a little bit different than Evergreen. Right. But it does include center. So part of it is the inconsistency. If this is citywide, and I think that we should have a policy that way, but then we shouldn't have this cutout of town center.
Right.
If somebody's putting that much money into building developments in town center and they have the private alleys, I just believe that should be part of that development. Because otherwise, 5 years later, they're coming back and they're upset, we're upset because they don't have a clue when they set that development up, that they're gonna have to maintain it, nor what the cost is. As soon as the homeowners get it, they freak out.
Right.
So that's just part of that. If you're gonna treat it that way, then I just think it's gonna be a little bit clearer maybe in order to do it, so.
But if the city's gonna require alleys in a new subdivision, why don't they require them to be public,
The ordinance
which they are
says-
now?
The ordinance passes, future alleys would be public.
Well, I
We have
think-
alleys because that's what the city required.
I mean, my understanding on a lot of these things is like we just took Brightleaf Streets on that, not that long ago. So the idea is, the intention is that they will be public, but we've got to look at them and go, you know, make sure that they're
And their alleys.
right
No, we
before
did
they
not
are.
bring their alleys in.
What's that?
Those alleys are not in,
In Brightleaf?
no. So I know that that's something they wanna do,
Right.
but the rest of the public streets are just now broad.
Mhm.
But there's that one alley in there
Yeah.
and it's not. So they have that to treat themselves. So any discussions with them?
Early on, there was, I think, a contact that was made, but we've certainly not seen them follow up. But they are certainly eligible to go through the process.
They'll probably be back because they're pretty tickled now with the water runoff issue, so that's taken care of.
They've probably been a little distracted.
But it's the same thing. I mean, to build something that new and then have the streets taken over, those alleys are not gonna be any worse shape than the street was. So why not do it all at one time? Instead of
Right.
coming back and saying, well, when you ask for it, they don't know.
Yeah.
That they have to do that, so.
Well, so then, do we want to, would somebody care to, do we need to make a motion to clarify these kind of vague points? Or do we want to try to solve, you know, have them look up this other stuff so we can figure that out? What would you guys like to do?
I'd like to understand the town center plan being able to come in and override
The city.
a city plan. Cause that doesn't make, and maybe it didn't, I don't know, I wasn't there when we did town center. But if that's the case, and Vince was the chair on that, if they go out and asking people about that, I have done the master plan twice, and I can tell you that's a dangerous thing. Asking people about where the property is and then come back and say, oh, we didn't do it that way. But in that particular case, that clarification, I think, would be important to know if the town center plan on bringing those alleys in overrode what the city plan was, because I don't think it's clear. And then there's still the whole definition of what else we've done. I think you need a policy. I just think that when you start cutting it up, it's hard enough between suburban and rural and the other areas. But when you get into that, which way do you do it? Maybe you can do it all the same. I mean, before the town center plan override, it was all the same. And there were a lot of private roads that they had to go in and put a lot of money in before the city would ever accept them.
So then, do we want to, I guess, get more information on this before we proceed any further? I mean, do you think, Ed, you have the specific questions that you need to have answered, or? I mean, I agree with you that we need to get that stuff
Well,
figured
I
out.
kind of think that it's hard for us to make a recommendation if we're not really sure
Right.
what the legal determination is as far as can they, has that overridden? Because obviously what they're saying is, oh yeah, you know, we can't bring that in. Well, if that's the case, then is that what the city wants? And if it is, then all right, you know. I just think these are the kind of problems we don't think about long-term enough.
Right.
And then it just keeps coming back, taking a chunk out of your rent every time. So in that particular case, if I'm fine saying we need a policy, I don't have a problem with that. I just would like to understand how the policy is interpreted for the alleys versus the streets. And does town center pull itself out as it's written here as a separate entity? So town center regulations are different. You know, we pay for street lights, a lot of that stuff. So does that mean the street codes are different in town center than the rest of the city? Is that what answer?
This policy is specific to, just to clarify, this policy we're discussing is only talking about streets or alleys within town center. So outside of town center, it's not going through this exact same process.
This is a citywide policy.
Yeah, I guess what
Yeah,
I'm
that's
hearing.
right. It is a
As far as
citywide
alleys,
policy.
it applies to town.
That's what's so
center only.
confusing.
Right, so I guess what I'm hearing is we do have a pretty clear standard. I grew up on one of these streets for taking on generalized roads. I also understand that the town center committee logically would go, sure, we would like to have all streets and alleyways public in town center. Logically, that makes sense. But I doubt that there was, as you said, a whole lot of like consideration as to how you actually make that happen, because to me, I would apply the city standard of like, this is just the process that we go through. And so can town center people petition to do this? Sure, just like everybody else can, whether they're accepted or not is, you know, maybe a different thing. So,
One of the keys in the policy is there's a date in here, and streets that were constructed after the date are not eligible, period. Alleys are because they're in the town center. That was the only exception.
But only alleys in town center.
Right.
okay. So then it sounds to me like we maybe don't necessarily want to change the policy as it is. We would like to have a further level of clarification in it, right? I assume we would get that from John as to whether one trumps the other one or how that all works.
Well, I think clearly this committee was apprised of the update to the town center master plan, and that was brought to this committee relative to an existing policy. And the request was made, do we want to amend the policy to include alleys in town center? That was an action of this committee that was made in 2023.
But that was to whether we would accept them, but then assuming we would then probably apply whatever metric we used prior to that to taking them on.
That was a decision of the Admin Public Works Committee to add alleys within town center into an existing policy for the public dedication of private street.
Which is the city policy.
Yeah.
Okay. So if that is the case, then basically what that is saying is whatever our street rules are, we would allow alleys to come in, but then we're applying the same process to the alleys that we would the streets.
Basically, yeah.
Yes, but I mean, it defers to our subdivision and development regulations, which goes back to how the developer makes it. I mean, and it does have a difference between what is required for an alley versus a street. I mean, an alley only has to be 20 feet width, whereas, you know, depending on the street, it could be anywhere between, well, you should have it about 26.1 to give it free.
And sidewalks and curbs.
And sidewalks and curves along those things. It treats alleys on its own here, but then it has, you know, general pavement thickness and things along those lines as well. We could come back with more information though on what the specific standards are for alleys versus the.
But I think, I mean, my question, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, is like, if the standards are, if there are builder standards for these alleys, which it sounds like they are, just like there are builder standards for the roads. And the alleys, just like the roads, need to be brought up to a specific standard in order for the city to accept them. That's what I'm understanding, right?
Yep.
So that makes sense to me. What, Tracy?
No matter where they are.
No matter where they are.
But you're not doing that to Crestview, our center.
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, so that's the next part of it. So
Crestview has no stormwater, has no width, has, you know, you're still, even though you repaved center, there's no stormwater, and the policy specifically states stormwater.
So then I think what we want to do is get the information back on those specific spots, roads, and so that we can understand what metric was applied, and then we can work through the rest of the part. I mean, in general, to me, the policy makes sense. I guess the question is, yeah, what was the level of consistency?
Crestview has not occurred. Even though commitments made with Crestview at this
Right,
point.
that's just money in the budget.
We're just saying if you're making exceptions for them, we'd like you to make an exception for us and be done.
I get it. You don't get what you don't ask for. I understand, but I also.
We also didn't have 140,000 either on our estimates from the same companies. They were ripping the city.
Ours was 77,000.
And so If it's
It's
a,
gone up since last year, but ours.
Yours was 77,000.
that's,
That's 1,000 a house. Sorry, I'd be done now if that's all
We
it
can't
took to
get
get it
people to
in
pay
with the
their
city.
assessment.
It's really not, I mean, it's not about the money, it's about,
It's a principle involved too.
it's that there was an ordinance passed.
well, but if the ordinance is applied where we're having a standard, do you guys feel like your alleys meet the standard that we're talking about? Or are they deficient?
They did 6 years ago.
That's not 6 years ago.
No, but you've been screwing around with it for 6 years.
Well, 6 years ago, it might have cost your
Plus, they didn't have
homeowners
that
300
standard
bucks.
6 years ago either. Because that only became when they added alleys to the policy in 2023.
So, okay, so maybe this is the concern I have.
Posts are moving every time we apply.
Well, but here's where I see the post moving, and perhaps I'm incorrect. When were these alleys allowed to come in? 2 years ago? Right.
So yeah, it was 2 years ago with.
Why weren't the alleys fixed before that?
Because the city was taking them.
Yeah.
City wasn't taking them. We couldn't take them until 2 years ago.
They only made that up 2 years
21,
ago.
they say that ordinance
Okay, so in
included.
2021, that was
The
4 years
ordinance
ago.
was in August of 2021.
So were the alleys up to condition in 2021?
They were 4 years better condition than they are now.
That's
Yeah.
not the question. Were they up to the appropriate condition 4 years
Yes.
ago?
Yes,
They were.
yes.
Did they pass an inspection 4 years ago?
They weren't inspected 4 years ago.
So I guess my thing is, we gotta figure out some things on our end to get this, but I am, I don't want to, I wanna create a situation that works best for everybody.
We've offered a cost sharing with the city as a partnership and the city will not negotiate. They say no.
What is it?
We've got 3 alleys. We've offered to pay for 1 if the city pays for 2. The city is not willing to negotiate on anything.
So okay, so if it's 70 grand, that's slightly more than $20,000 an alley.
Yeah,
And,
we've got the money, we can pay for 1.
okay, well, if you have the money
In
to
our
pay for one,
reserves.
now you're talking about 50 grand, that's like $400 a person.
Well, I think the issue is the ordinance was passed, and since we brought this forward, you have applied the rules inconsistently for other streets and approved them and paid a whole lot more money.
Well, it seems like we have one, right? Because Crestview's not done.
Well, alleys, keep in mind with alleys, we've taken over the manors at the Meadows.
No, I'm talking about,
Street.
Vicky's saying that
Talking
we are,
about streets,
we're talking about streets we've taken on that we haven't
Housing
applied
applies
this
to
thing to.
streets
So
now.
Crestview would fall under that, but we haven't spent any money.
We haven't done that.
So,
You put $1 million aside for it.
Evergreen Forest and,
an evergreen fund
Center.
down south.
Are you gonna require Crestview to put in sewers and a new pavement and overlay it before the city takes it over to put in Main Street? No. City's just looking at putting in Main Street.
I can tell you, I'm gonna make sure Main Street's built the right way. Whatever they're talking about now
Yeah,
doesn't
but
make any sense
for
to
the
me.
city to even take it,
It
it
won't,
should be
we aren't
brought
gonna
up to
take it,
standards and everything.
well,
no, yeah.
a connected city or a connected street is a slightly different thing than an isolated neighborhood alley. I mean, those are not, if that's what you're gonna say, then the same standards that apply to the streets apply to the alleys. And your alleys don't meet the standard.
Neither does Crestview. Neither
And we
does
haven't done
Center.
anything to Crestview yet.
Neither
just like
does
we haven't-
Center.
Just like we haven't done anything to your guys.
Neither does Evergreen Forest.
Okay, so then we gotta figure this out on what evergreen and stuff is, right? So do you need a motion to do that, or are you guys clear on what needs to happen to come back?
Yeah, looking into, if the town center update plan overrides, our current policy, and then also, understanding the circumstances behind Evergreen Forest Drive and Center Avenue.
Yep.
And then just to clarify too on Crestview, the idea would be, and how it's planned, is that the city would actually purchase easement and rights to Crestview, so that would be something that would be an improvement project. by the
That's
city.
building
So that's,
new road.
yeah, that's building. a new road. Yep.
Okay. So do you need a motion and a second for that, or are you guys good?
Either or would be fine in this case. I guess a motion could work.
All right.
Yep.
I'll make the motion.
All right, Mr. Jackson gonna make the motion. Anybody care to second?
Did you read it, what it is?
Uh,
What is the motion?
Two pieces, info and circumstances on Center Avenue and Evergreen Forest Drive, the circumstances of its public acceptance. And then, can that provision of the town center update plan override, what's currently listed on city code? So is it when it says future alleys, future roads, can it override what's on the books by ordinance as our standard for streets and our policy?
Nathan, did you catch that? Good, okay. Everybody good? All right, so we got a first. Anybody care a second? Mr. Hopper will second. Okay, all those in favor of getting some more information and figuring out what's going on, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, I assume that won't take very long for you guys to figure that out. Great, we'll see it hopefully in March. And then we will get this squared away. We'll get it figured. Okay. Up next.
Thank you for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. Review of contract approval process and general contract management processes, all wards. Rick?
Chair, Farmer, council members, City Administrator Lee asked me to prepare this and put it on the agenda for you tonight. This was my best effort to try to summarize kind of how we go about agreements and contracts and execute them. I'm happy to go through this in detail if that's what you prefer me to do.
No.
To avoid that, we can do that as
Yep.
well.
So the question, and this was probably, I didn't do a good job of asking this. So we've run into an issue a couple times where we have a contract that is approved by the council that then needs to get a signature by the mayor or the city administrator or whatever, and then a counter signature back. And we seem to be pretty frequently maybe missing a step in there. And so I kind of wanted to understand more that than this.
The only time that should take place, Chair, is when it is a contract with an entity that we're a subsidiary of. So if there is an agreement with MoDOT or with St. Louis County, in that case, that should be, we have to sign it first, but or it's a federal government, different organization. If it's with a contractor, that would be the subsidiary of the city, which means they should be agreeing to the conditions before second
So I just know there was some kind of issue, I think, with the county.
reading. Yes, that,
So my question is, where in the chain did we fall apart?
well, in that case with the county, that was with the reoccupancy permit, and we technically signed that before they sign it.
Right, but we didn't, right?
Well, I guess should they have signed it before we, like, should we have forced St. Louis County? So that was the issue with that specific.
Okay. So in general terms, because, you know, it's not an isolated incident.
Yes, yes. So in general terms, second reading should not occur with official vote if an agreement does not have signature from a counterparty that is not kind of a, well, county, state, federal government, period,
So
or a
then,
different other city.
as we go forward, obviously Megan is leaving us here at the end of the month, so whomever their new city clerk would be, is that up to them to make sure that that is in place, or how does that work?
In that case, it could be them, but also it could be something that could be added to the agenda. It's on there, though, the agreement that is as an attachment, it is provided that, you know.
But then I guess I'm saying making sure it's properly executed.
Yes, yes. In that
That's up
case,
to the
that is,
city
that's
clerk?
up to the city clerk.
Correct. Okay, that was an easy one. Didn't have very much on it. Anybody have any other questions on the contract stuff? Did you guys understand what I was talking about? Okay.
I guess I was a little surprised it was even in here. I mean, because it's pretty,
I too am surprised that I was having it the other side of the conversation, so I'm glad that we're getting that squared away. Okay. Number 3, review of snow removal operations from our January 5th storm.
Chair, Farmer, council members, I'll start off with this one. Do my best to relive the snow battle that we just went through. January 4th through January 6th. As you know, we had a significant snow event in the city of Wildwood. Had about 8 inches that fell, I think, in total, combined snow and ice. It was a heavy snow that did fall. I would note from my records, that's about the second highest event of the past decade. 2019, we had quite a winter with a 12-inch snowfall, and I think closer to 20 inches of snow or more that winter. We average about 9 to 10 inches of snowfall a winter, so this was an unusual event, to say the least. I tried to provide kind of a general summary of how we go about our snow fight in general, And to give you a sense of what we do have 5 contractors. I think you generally know that assist with snow removal efforts. T Hill, Kelp, Westfall, Go Green, and Omni are those contractors. And T Hill and Kelp do the largest share, followed by Westfall, and then Go Green and Omni. We have 350 lane miles of streets that we address, public roads that we keep clear. And basically, we have those roads divided within about 28 separate snow routes. Includes all the traditional subdivisions as well as all the rural roads that we have in the city of Longwood. We've got all our snow maps, our snow routes mapped. So we have a thick book of snow routes that we put together and tweak in the fall in preparation for the snow season. Usually there's a few mild changes that go into those books every year because contractor staff can change a little bit. We might change a route around to add another route or move a route from contractor A to contractor B, say. And then, of course, we do pick up new roads. So when we on a subdivision, we have to add it to the route map. When we get a forecast for a snowstorm, Scott Hummel, the street superintendent, and I are usually tracking it. It shows up in the forecast. And then as the forecast firms up, we've pretty well talked it through and have agreed upon a plan of action. Essentially, Scott, at this point, I worked with Scott long enough that I pretty much know what he's going to suggest, and we're very much on the same page typically for snow removal. So once it gets within 24 hours, we've got a plan in place, and he's coordinated with our contractors in terms of what the expectation is, how we want them to respond when, what time, and when to be on the road. As the event unfolds, the street superintendent is our lead. So Scott Hummel will coordinate directly with the contractors. They have one individual who's identified as their lead. So he would be in coordination with the 5 leads for each contractor. Of course, they have amongst them all their trucks and their drivers. So we can have upwards of 40 trucks on the road. Those individual truck drivers are communicating with their lead, with each company. We don't try to go that far deep in communications. We're strictly focused on communicating with the lead with each company. And Scott handles that during the event. It keeps me apprised of the progress as it's going forward. One of the things that we do get into when this event starts to play out and the snow starts falling, we'll typically get out on the streets as best we can to monitor the situation and the response of our contractors. This all depends on the forecast and how much snow is in the forecast. Obviously, if 1-inch snowfall is different than what we had early in January. But if we have a significant snowfall that's forecast, we'll get additional guys in public works out in trucks as best we can. And we try to monitor their progress, the contractor's progress in that manner. As long as we can safely get about and not put our own folks in harm's way, that's what we try to do. And that can be a problem, frankly, if you get ice events and icing that's occurring. So we will do our best to monitor and inspect routes as the snow is flying, and keep tabs on the work that's going on. One of the things that we do get into are the longer events become a challenge. This was a long event. It was exceeded 24 hours in continuous duration. That's a stressful event. It creates a lot of stress for our contractors. It creates stress on the equipment. It creates stress on loaders that load snow spreaders with salt. Basically, equipment is going to break down the longer the event that you have. So that is one of the challenges that we face. This was clearly a long event. We knew that going into it. So when we get into longer events, at least from our perspective, sometimes we'll split into 2 phases, 2 shifts, 2 12-hour shifts, and split our own staff up in that way to try to extend our capabilities over a longer period. So I wanted to point that out as well. One of the things that we did, and we frequently do this, is we try to focus our efforts, our contractors' efforts, first on the main roads. Primary roads, the main subdivision streets, and then defer our attention on side streets and cul-de-sac streets. And that is what our attention was with this storm. It was a significant forecast snow event. And that's normally when we would do that. Obviously, a small event, a 1-inch snowfall, probably don't need to do that. But in this instance, that was our plan. And that's really what we tried to get the word out in our social media posts and on our website, that was the intent. Try to keep those main subdivision streets and our main rural roads open and clear as best we could, and then follow back on those secondary streets, those cul-de-sac streets as needed, or as we felt were needed. So with this storm, we did come out on Saturday. I think the snow was forecast to start on Sunday morning early. We had our guys out on the street Saturday afternoon putting down salt. So we pre-salted. It was not forecast to come down as rain initially, so we felt the salt was a safe approach. It turned out that was a smart move. The salt that we placed at least we felt it bought us some time on Sunday morning and kept the roads reasonably passable for a period of time. Let our guys then go back, get some rest, get some sleep, rest up for the fight. So then they came back in early on Sunday morning and started driving the routes, plowing and salting as well at that time. One of the things that we ran into with this storm is that it was really the first plowable storm of the year. We don't get to practice, unfortunately. Guys that are out there get thrust into the fight and they have to respond as best they can. So this was the first plowable event. It was a challenging event to plow. So we had new drivers on the route, potentially in some situations, learning their routes as they went, essentially. It's not the best situation, but that's what they get paid to do. It does make it more challenging, but by and large, it works out. Sleet fall on Sunday that we had a layer of sleet that kind of got mixed in with heavy snow. I think, as you know, it did create issues. And I think that was the one thing that we didn't anticipate at the time, was the degree that would be a problem or problematic later. We basically had a heavy snowfall and sleet mixed in on Sunday. And then what we found was that some of the streets that we had intended not to go back on didn't get enough attention early enough. And that sleet fall and that heavy snow just became very challenging to clear. We saw this pretty much around the city on all routes. It was very difficult for our drivers to get the sleet and snow pushed to the side. And then particularly bore out on cul-de-sacs because they really had difficulties pushing the snow around the circle. During the snowstorm, we don't push the snow back to the curb. We don't clear the whole cul-de-sac. We just try to keep it passable. When the snow is done, then we try to push it back to the curb and clear the whole cul-de-sac. By the time we went back to do that, the snowfall had gotten heavier and froze up enough that it became very difficult for drivers to do that. So the reality was the quality didn't, quite frankly, lapsed a bit relative to where we typically expect it to be in this event. And that was unfortunate. And that was just a function of the length of the event and that heavy snow and sleet mix that came down on Sunday. So with that reference, we did have some specific challenges on a couple routes. Tom Kelp came to City Council and talked about some of his routes, or really one of his routes that lagged, and we had some difficulties getting back on some streets as quickly as they should have been addressed. And those streets had challenges getting cleared, and it was difficult, unfortunately, but they did ultimately get cleared. So I did throw some suggestions at the end of my memo relative to things I think we could improve upon moving forward. And as I said, we get these events infrequently and we don't get a chance to really practice for them. So we get thrown into the fire and we learn a little bit every time. But we can always try to do better. Every event is different. It's not like playing a game of basketball. The rules change essentially a little bit every time we go out. Mother Nature likes to throw curveballs at us and we have to respond the best we can based on our experience. So while we learned a lot from this storm, we may never see a storm like this again for the foreseeable future, quite frankly. It's just the way Mother Nature works. But there's clearly some things that we can do better, and we always want to aspire to do better. And one of the things that Thomas and we talked in great depth about things that didn't go so well with this snowstorm. And one of the things that we'd like to do, and we've not done it before, is really put a snow policy in place and have the council and you approve it. And so we'd like to put that together and probably run that through public safety as well, frankly. We've not done that in the past and there's no reason why we shouldn't. So we'd like to move forward and put a formal snow removal policy in place that really kind of puts in black and white what we're trying to do so that you're all around the same page and it's really clear what the expectations are. A couple other things I mentioned is I would like to look very seriously about using the treated salt as a 100% salt option for the city of Wildwood, just from the standpoint of the colored salt will make it easier for us to tell what streets have been salted. So I think if we went that route, it might have some value. The other intent there is to try to use less salt overall. It's intended to be more effective and the goal is to use less. So it's supposed to be better for the environment in that respect as well. And then finally, I would like to talk, and I have not done this yet, but I would like to regroup with Tom Kelp at an appropriate time. And for next season, I would really like to try to see if we can get salt spreaders on all of our trucks. So we do have some equipment that Tom Kelp has that he puts out that are just plow trucks. But I think it would really be a benefit to us if we can get those plow trucks equipped with salt spreaders. Pretty much all our other contractors are situated with that right now. It's taken some time, but we've gotten to that point. I would like to get Kelp Contracting to be on the same page and have all their plow trucks equipped with salt spreaders instead of just having plow trucks. So with that, I'll wrap up unless Thomas, you would like to add a few comments. I know you were very heavily involved in the response.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Brown. I was just gonna maybe touch upon, overall, the city was in pretty good shape, but just wanted to note, and this was sent out via email to the council as well, that Kelp had some issues with villages of Brightleaf, West Glen, the Sandalwood area. It seems that there was not enough salt put down, but that should have been caught earlier, and just wanted to take responsibility for that. Should have been communicated to you all.
Sure.
So, Tom Kelp does my street in a lot of Ward 5. He uses a grader.
Sorry to talk over somebody, but you guys are on mute. There's no audio coming out.
Oh, that's on you. Yeah.
Joe can't hear us.
Now I hear lots of you.
Yeah.
There's now.
Yeah, but now there's a really bad echo.
Good. All right, so we're just recapping the storm event and the response to it, Nathan.
Yeah, we had everything up until just a real brief into Mr. Marshall's statements. It kind of cut out right then. So Councilmember Marshall, apparently the technology didn't want to hear what you had to say.
It's fine. That's a real compliment. I appreciate that. Other question was, so that's just a little bit more on Tom. I think that, what he's doing in the streets that he's on, I don't know you could have done any better if he had plows on there or salt on those particular ones, but he did a good job there. But my question was, I know years ago he did this. Do they drive the routes so you know which streets are theirs? Because the city has worked with him. So the idea of having new people, that shouldn't be affect they know exactly what streets are taken care of.
Yeah, they have the streets clearly identified.
So the streets that we get popped up that we're missing, was that just a driver?
It's a
went down
driver.
the wrong street?
It's a driver messing up, but it should be caught a little bit earlier so we can check it. But there are certain instances, I know that there were some breaks, but we should catch it and then get the guy back out there.
Yeah, they're provided the route maps before the season starts and so the expectation should be clear from that perspective. Again, as these storms unfold, things happen. People can call in sick, people can, they may need to shift, they may need to put somebody new in a truck that hadn't been in it, and that's like it or not, that can happen, and the guy may not be that familiar. Stuff does
Thank you.
happen. Yeah.
Jay.
I have a couple thoughts. One, I think you guys need to stop beating yourselves up. You said it several times and I don't know of anyone that will disagree. That was an event like none other that I've seen, to include the one in 19. The combination of snow and sleet made it, I plow my streets in my neighborhood, so myself and the guy who's replacing me do it. And it was impossible to keep up with and to figure out how to move. Now, we're amateurs, not professionals. I will say, whoever did Allenton and Melrose, which contractor, do you happen to know off the top of your head?
T-Hill.
Well, all I can tell you is that group far exceeded anything I've ever seen, right? To include Manchester, which was a disaster, and yet Melrose and Allenton were crystal clear. Like, if I could have mimicked whatever that was that they did it right. And yet, I don't know that it's possible. All that said, you're talking to a military guy who learned the art of the after action report, meaning you should ask yourself, what did we do well and what can we do better? What I heard you say just now was not what your memo says, and what I think I heard you say was, we had spots where there were failures, oftentimes driver driven, a result of a driver issue. Okay, so figure out what we can do to address that on the fly, but don't beat yourselves up over this. Please.
Thought they were in great shape.
Yeah, I will say, I drove around that day, that weekend a lot. I've talked to a lot of people in different places. I think overall, and certainly in comparison to other cities, including the city of St. Louis and MoDOT and everybody else, generally speaking, these contractors and you guys did an exceptional job of a very difficult thing. My concern is not to beat you guys up about a big storm or any of those things. There's nothing we can do about it, and those guys did a tremendous job. The concern I have is that it does seem, and I appreciate Mr. Kelp coming in and talking to us last month, and saying, hey, they definitely had seemingly a driver that didn't do something. I don't know what it would be, but it definitely didn't work well, and that took a long time to get sorted out. But I do think that, I'm a little curious how we don't have a formal snow removal policy as a city. That seems a little odd and slightly concerning to me, but also, when there's a lot of people going, as Tom said, when there's a lot of people going in different places and trying to figure this stuff out, and we're all trying to help people and do the right thing, communication is a super key thing. And there were seemingly some very real communication. I don't even know that I would call them issues. I mean, specific to a couple of the neighborhoods, mine being one of them, and mine was nowhere near as bad as Brightleaf. I mean, those are real communication failures. And the other concern I have is, I'm looking at a thing where we're talking about, it looks like everybody's right around 8 miles per truck. So everybody's kind of got an equal set here. I don't know how many miles Brightleaf and Sandalwood and West Glen Farms is. I mean, I assume it's not a huge number, but there is a level of, I would say, contract oversight and management and expectations to say, hey, like, this wasn't done. What are we doing? Now we got to pay more people to come out and oversee it. The city staff has to get involved. I think that sometimes as a city, people forget that, a lot of cities, Chesterfield, other places, they have their own trucks that go out and do these things. And so they're not doing a great job. Our guys, we benefit because, you know, they have to be responsible in coming out and fixing this stuff, but I mean, that's a pretty significant chunk of an area that wasn't addressed, and so, I don't know if we're asking any questions about it. I don't know how that assessment goes. I mean, as Rob said, this isn't a systemic failure at all. These are some spot issues, and some of these things, I know we had a house where like we pushed snow in front of a driveway, like that happens, especially in an event like this. There was some courts around me where people parked on the street, can't get a snowplow through. Nothing we can do about that. But some of these other things, I mean, that, you know, figuring out ahead of time what's going on, a driver's down, we gotta get other people in. I think we need to really take a hard look at that, because I think that we can probably apply that knowledge, hopefully, we can apply that knowledge all over the place and figure out, you know, where we might be making some of these other things happen. So, you know, I appreciate Mr. Kelp coming in and saying, hey, we made a mistake. I appreciate Tom, you saying, you know, there are some communication issues, we'll work on it. I would just encourage you guys to really, you know, hopefully we don't have another 10-inch snow, but that doesn't mean we can't do better on some other stuff. So I think I would use the examples that we've got and really work hard to address that situation the way that it is. Because overall, I mean, I was out by Rob, I was out in Ward 1. I've talked to people and they were like, this was great, everything was perfect. There was a small number of people that didn't feel that way, and they were kind of stuck trying to figure out, is everything frozen in? So I think we can work to get that addressed. All right, moving on. Consideration of change order on Manchester Taylor resurfacing and signal project.
Moved beyond the next item, is that possible?
Oh.
Am I wrong?
It's for concrete.
Concrete, did I skip one? Oh yeah, concrete street replacement, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So the next item is, you guys will be familiar with if you've been on the committee before. We have an annual concrete street and sidewalk replacement project that we bid this time of year. Scott Hummel takes the lead in that project. We opened bids on it a couple weeks ago. I apologize, I referenced 2024 in my memo. I am corrected there. It should be 2025, obviously. Good news this year, when we bid it, we did receive 8 contractors submitting bids again. So there's a reasonable amount of competition going on for our work. It's a good thing for prices overall. The low bidder for this year was M&H Concrete Contractors, and they came in at $1,288,284. So we do have 1.3 million budgeted for the project this year again. And Kelp was the second low. They were just a little bit above $1,320,000. So essentially tonight we are recommending going forward with an agreement with M&H to do our 2025 concrete street and sidewalk replacement project. Because our overall budget is 1.3 million, we would, if you guys approve it, the amount of the contract would be $1,250,000 to M&H. So we'll scale back to the degree of work a slight bit to make sure we stay under our budgeted amount. And we will hold back about $50,000 for additional construction inspection services as necessary. So the recommendation to you is to move forward with an agreement with M&H Contractors to do the 2025 concrete street and sidewalk replacement project. Agreement be for the not to exceed amount of $1,250,000. And if there are any questions, I'll do my best.
It's Eden's.
I'll make the motion, and I do have a question. First,
Mr. Jacks, he seconds it.
yeah, just one of the concerns or complaints that I hear most frequently is just if any slabs that are replaced, if they're required to match the previous concrete treatment. You know, sometimes there's the swirling patterns or effects. And sometimes they're replaced and they don't match. That upsets certain people more than others. Probably know who I'm referencing, but
I'd be
sometimes
glad to speak to that.
yeah, sometimes it does make a difference in terms of how slick the pad is, if it does have that textured effect, and I can understand why you would want it to look the same. So what are we specifying when they do those projects?
Well, I'll be quite frank, Ms. Edens, that is the opinion of the resident. In my 10 years, this has never come up anywhere else. I think the answer is we would be glad to match whatever we need to match. So if there really is a newer sidewalk that needs to match a finish, we'll do our best, I think, in that situation. What you have to keep in mind and recognize, in most cases, we're back replacing sidewalks that have been in place for decades, 20 years, 30 years. There is no finish in place on that sidewalk or anywhere near. It really is not an issue that comes up when we do the work. I don't, and you can correct me if I'm misspeaking, but
Were you referring to sidewalks or streets? I'm sorry.
Sidewalks.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, the aggregate, the rock that's used in it, a lot of the times the newer ones are more limestone based. A lot of the older ones were more Merrimack gravel based, and they're not gonna match.
I think she doesn't mean the color. She's talking about, there's like some of them have had some type of a finish on them.
Finish?
Yeah,
Right.
typically we use the broom finish. Swirled finish wasn't typically done by the city. That might have been a development before the city was even
But
incorporated.
again,
But we can match what's there.
when you're replacing a 20-year-old sidewalk, there is no finish that you're matching, because that finish is long worn away. If it was a brand new sidewalk, okay, there might be a finish there to match, but that's not what we're doing. We're out there replacing old sidewalks in old neighborhoods, and that finish is long gone if it was a broom finish. So it's, I mean, we'll be glad to work with the resident if there's a specific concern. Believe me, that's not a problem.
Anybody else? Nathan, you got anything? This is, it's not the same people as last year, right?
No, thank you for asking. We were very pleased to see that the contractor we worked with, in this case, we did work with them in 2022, and we did a great job for us at that time.
Cool. Before we vote, I just one other thing. Do we have any idea why we're getting more bids again than we were getting last year? Or is it just sort of like a cyclical thing?
For this project?
Yeah, I mean, like, cause before, I don't think we got a bunch. If I remember, I don't think we had a whole bunch.
Last year, I think we got 8.
Yeah.
So it was good competition, but I think, yeah, the year before too, it got pretty slim. And we did see a couple contractors locally basically closed up shop. But I think it's a good sign for the industry. I mean, there's new contractors are, we talked about this, our contractor for Manchester Taylor is a newly formed contractor. So that's great to see that occurring.
Were you referring to the Manchester Taylor project?
No, the guys that were in Westland Farms and Lake Chesterfield, where they were like,
Last year's
Next level
contractor
whatever that was.
struggles with this.
Yeah.
That was an understatement.
E Hill.
No, it was somebody else and it was something special.
But it wasn't Star Construction.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. Everybody know where we're going with this? Anybody want the motion repeated? Okay.
That was quality.
All those in favor of our contractor proposals?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, up next is our Manchester Taylor change order.
All right. Chair Farmer, council members, this next item is relative to our Manchester Taylor resurfacing and signal project, which is underway currently. As you're probably aware, if you drive Manchester Road, they are working on the Snooks in that area currently. They are doing sidewalk replacement, island replacement work. That entails saw cutting the pavement to remove those items and then repouring them with the new features that will be in place with the project. During some of that work, and this dates back to December at this point, their equipment, the saw severed the traffic signal detection loops at both of the intersections. So the older intersections were included signal induction loops cut into the pavement, and those loops come from the pavement into a box adjacent to the road and then into the controller. When they saw cut the pavement, they saw cut the loop. So as a result, the signals were put on a pre-timed operation. And so the signal serves all essential movements at the intersection, regardless of whether there's a vehicle at that location or not. Meaning that you're going to see delay at those intersections because at times there's no vehicle that you're waiting for. So what we were proposing is to address that situation temporarily. The new signal was ordered and is going to be installed later this spring. But until that occurs, we'd like to alleviate the situation where the signals are on pre-timed operation. And the way to go about that is to put temporary video detection in place. So we did get a price from Gershner Electric. They are the sub-consultant to do this work. And they gave us a price of $12,000 total for both intersections to install video cameras that would alleviate the problem. So that is what we are recommending, is to move forward with this approach. It is short term, but when we looked at the pricing for this work, it does seem very reasonable. Incidentally, I believe the permanent installation is gonna run us 40 grand per intersection for these cameras. So these are temporary video cameras that the contractor happens to have on hand. They're used, but Gershner does exclusively signal work, so they've got a lot of equipment available to them. They'll install it, get it running for us. We'll keep it in operation as best we can for the next months until they get replaced with the new signal equipment. So that's the recommendation tonight, is to move forward with a change order with the contractor to install the video detection for the amount of not to exceed $12,000. And with that, I'll close for any questions you may have.
Mr. Hopper.
No questions, but I will, as somebody who drives this pretty regularly, I will absolutely make the motion to approve this. And it is a topic of conversation pretty consistently for folks around this area. So that light has been a pain point for a long time.
Ms. Eden.
Okay. I love that you found the solution to the problem. What I don't understand is, why is the party responsible for cutting that and their insurance carrier not responsible for footing the bill? Why is this a change order that we're accepting? If the concrete cutter damaged the loop, why are they not paying for it?
It was intended to be cut.
Yeah, there's no other way around it with the work. We specified the saw cutting on the plans. You can't avoid the situation. Yes, you could fault the designer, you can fault the city for not anticipating the problem. We certainly could have set up a pay item installation of temporary video detection and included it in the contract.
Right.
We did not do that. You can fault me for not picking up that concern. We would have still paid to do it because it would have been a pay item of work, but that would have been the best approach. Unfortunately, we didn't have the foresight to see the problem before it happened. So now we're paying for it after the fact.
Okay. The explanation helps. When I read it, it sounded like a contract error that was created in trying to do the repair. So that's how the memo might read to the public. So if we move this on to council, we might want to reword that, because it reads like somebody made a mistake and they didn't fix it themselves. So I would just kind of add that by the time it gets pushed along, and I'd be ready at, council to just say, I get that we would have paid for it either way, so it doesn't really matter. I guess somebody might ask, would it have cost less to have factored it in first? And that's already passed, but we'll do better the next time.
Yeah, I guess I'm just totally amazed how, if we told them to do that, we didn't anticipate it. If they do this, they didn't anticipate it, but then suddenly we come back and it's $12,000.
Mr. Marshall, I've been doing this for 30 years and I've never set up temporary video detection on a project.
I can't.
I've been doing this for 30 years and I've never set up temporary video detection. It's a newer technology. In most cases, you would just put the signal on pre-timed operation and people would live with it.
Well, I was over there 4 times today, and I understand what Nathan's saying, but honestly, efficiency, there's concrete trucks, there's roads already blocked off for a month or two, and then we give them back the $12,000. That just seems crazy. I mean, and man, I 4 times today I was over there and I work around the concrete truck and I know exactly, but it is under construction. But to put $12,000 in something, and then as soon as it comes in the spring, they're gonna put similar equipment in, the new equipment in, and we're gonna give them back that equipment and they'll go on to another project. But I just think that's,
To clarify, the equipment would, and I get what you're saying, but the equipment would be ordered in the spring. It would most likely be delivered probably in the fall. It'd be one of the touching finishes that would go
oh, I
on.
thought it said it here, it was something in the
That'd be
spring.
ordered by the contractor. That's when it can be officially ordered.
Yeah, you gotta fix this.
And you got a lot of work to do.
I think
now.
we expect the signal to be installed this summer, so it
Says spring here,
late spring, early summer,
it's like
right?
2 months. Yeah.
So I would expect we would get a benefit, what, at least for 4 months for the installation. So I mean, if you look at it on a cost per monthly basis, it's, you know, this is a close to a $3 million project. I think it's a reasonable amount of money. And again, the unit prices that we were quoted, we checked the tabulations that are kept by the MoDOT and by the county, and prices were very reasonable for this type of work. So if it wasn't nearly as reasonable, I wouldn't be so quick to recommend it, but it's a fairly reasonable amount of money to spend to alleviate the concern. But I get it, it's spending good money after bad.
Is the temporary equipment a rental or do we own it?
No, it's pretty much renting it for
The
that
rental,
duration.
so we wouldn't be entitled any credit when it comes to putting in the new stuff.
Maybe practically putting in like a used version of what eventually will go in, which it's gonna cost us about $40,000, the official version.
Maybe it should be worded as it's a rental fix, if that's, because I'm thinking if we own it, then maybe we should get credit back after we're done with it.
Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, just super quick, because you said maybe it could have been something foreseen. If it had been foreseen, and I'm not sure that it could or couldn't have, but if it had been foreseen and we paid them $3.2 million to do a project and that we had written it in there, maybe the contract would have gone up, maybe it wouldn't have. Maybe they'd thrown it in because it's a service that we requested specifically. So I'm back to hey, just whatever you can do in your processes to try and make sure you ask that question beforehand. I would encourage you to do it.
Is this is this gonna go on the lights or is it like a standalone, like one of those orange things they have down on Long Road where they crush that stuff?
Yeah. No, it's like you see on traffic signals all around town where it looks like a camera on top.
Yeah, so it's affixed to the light
Video
that's already
cameras,
there.
no, it's a signal.
Kind of a blue light thing, almost looks like a blue-white light on top.
Yeah, it's like a
They're
video.
usually white in color.
Well,
We have video detection on the signal right out here at
okay,
Taylor and Main Street.
Yeah.
Those cameras are video detection cameras.
thanks.
So you guys heard a lot of suggestions. I think they're all probably good ones. I would also suggest, I go through that intersection pretty much every day, a bunch of times too, but I know we've talked to them about it. That intersection and the intersection at West Glen Farms and 100, the timing on those lights is like so bad. And so I'm all for trying to help, I guess. I think we could have probably done this better. I get why we're doing it, but like getting people through one light very quickly to sit at the other one for 4 minutes doesn't sound like
Efficiency.
the most and best use of everybody's time. So what do we need to do to get the timing or these cameras or whatever it is to get the timing better at that? I know that's not our road, but like we gotta do something. I'm wasting years of my life sitting at that street light.
You're referencing 100 and West Glen Farms?
Mhm. Yep. Or 100 in Manchester, whatever you wanna call it, coming up. It's bad. Every direction is bad.
Well, obviously 100 is a state route and MoDOT has a coordinated signal system in place on Route 100.
Mhm.
So they do have timing plans that are developed and the whole emphasis is to try to drive a coordinated platoon of vehicles on 100 during the peak hour. And that's MoDOT's focus, frankly.
Right.
And we struggle with that because as a city, we don't have that same desire.
Right. Well, I mean, I see, especially in the afternoon, you'll have a bunch of people trying to get left going up Manchester. And because when this worked right, it didn't work. Like you'd have a car sitting there almost at a gridlock situation. So,
So you're talking about someone turning left on to Manchester from 100?
yep, and then that
that's-
lights,
That's caused by this signal issue, the fact that what we've tried to do with our traffic consultant is allow for additional flow through on Manchester.
Mhm.
But the problem is when these lines were cut, it's no longer doing the detection.
it didn't work when they were there.
So in that case, this is buildup.
You're talking Pier Side and Schnucks, and we're talking 100 in West Glen.
Yeah. And the two, I mean, they're like whatever, 50 feet apart.
So the,
Yes.
So people are coming through, they've waited, now they don't wanna sit and wait for 4 minutes, so they're stacking up to come left, and that light at Pierside is red, and that was well before we cut anything. It's been that way for almost as long as I have lived here. It's been like that. So I don't know what we need to do.
so the coordination issue is a function of the time clock in the controllers that we have. When we replace the cabinets and we replace the controllers, we'll get a new GPS time clock. And the consultants have been telling me that once we get the new GPS time clock, it'll stay in coordination with MoDOT's signal on 100.
Do we have that
Have that
in
yet.
writing somewhere?
The guy who's running the saw.
Let's get that written down. Cause I would love to believe them.
I'm banking on it myself, so if it doesn't work, I know I'm gonna hear about it, frankly. But that's what they've been telling me, and, we were asking how quickly will this come in, can we get it installed now? And their answer is we don't have it yet. But as soon as it's available, I wanna even explore getting it in the cabinets we have, if that makes sense. But once we get the GPS time clock, it's supposed to revert to lining up in sequence with MoDOT's system. Now, there's always catches. The
Well, I
biggest
guess my
catch-
bigger worry then, if that's the case, that's fine, but that light cycle is still 3.5 minutes.
It's very long, and that's a MoDOT decision that we unfortunately don't have control over, as you might imagine.
Right.
They like to have long cycle lengths to force more traffic through on Route 100. I think there's things we can do to help. I've been talking to Lockmuir, the traffic engineering company, about providing a greater level of effort to respond to our concerns. And I think they're certainly available and interested in doing that. So I'd like to work on a fairly minimal on-call contract with them. So when we get complaints, I want to have them come out and assess the situation and then have them work with MoDOT to get it addressed. Now, that might cost us a few dollars, but I think it would be worth it in the long run, because right now it's very frustrating for us when we get complaints to send them to MoDOT into the black box that MoDOT is. Well, Lockmuir works directly with MoDOT, and those guys know MoDOT very well. And I would trust that they would communicate with their traffic engineers directly and hopefully get the situation addressed if there's something that can be done. The other thing that comes into play quite a bit on 100 is the emergency vehicles.
Right.
Every time they run through an emergency vehicle, it knocks everything out of sequence because they preempt it.
Mhm.
So I don't know how many vehicles go through on a daily basis, but I know it's more than one.
It's
So
a lot.
so it has to go through a process of basically resyncing that system, and that takes several cycles to work through. So if you're unlucky and you came through and that had just occurred, that's gonna be with us, and I don't think that's gonna change.
All right, well, we've got a motion by Mr. Hopper to press this forward. Does anybody care to second this idea? Seconded by Mr. Albers. All those in favor of our temporary fix, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
I will also oppose it. Any abstentions? All right, motion presses forward. Last but not least here in Public Works. Oh, no, we got two more things. No, three more things. Holy cow. 4 more, no. Finish mowing. What do we got?
Chair Farmer, council members, this last item is a new one for the department, and we've been looking for ways to try to cut costs, and mowing is one of those love-hate things, quite frankly, that we have. At least that's my personal opinion. It looks great when you do it, but it certainly costs money to do it, unfortunately. It gets a lot of public positive comments, but we hate to pay the bill. So what we're trying to do here is, what we have done is put an RFP on the street, and requested bids to do our finished mowing for Public Works for 2025 with an option to extend that for 2 more years. And with our new Public Works specialist, we're able to really quantify our mowing areas using GIS. And we have about 15.5 acres that we mow currently along our routes, and that includes a little bit on 109 and at Route 100. And so we've tabulated that, we put that in a fancy RFP, we put some specifications that we expect to be followed relative to mowing, and they came up with a bid to mow, and the low bidder was Go Green Lawn and Landscape. We had 4 total bids, which I think I provided that information to you. Go Green, the bid for next year was $65,000. And they did provide a cost to increase their amount for the next 2 years. They provided a 10% one-time increase for 2026 with the hope to continue mowing through 2027. So with this recommendation, we believe that we can save about $65,000 next year on mowing for public works, so we think it's a good thing. And so the recommendation tonight is to pursue a city contractor agreement with Go Green Lawn and Landscape to do our finished mowing for 2025, and the agreement would be for the not to exceed amount of $65,000. However, I would like to ask for a contingency of $10,000 for additional work, as we might find necessary. So that is the recommendation, and I'll address any questions if you have any.
All right, any questions? If you got one?
No,
You good?
stand by my one, I think.
Yes, sir.
That second, going into that third year, are you comfortable with the contract that you've got some teeth in it, that if they just decide they're gonna not do any better, maintain or do less? I mean, I was a little concerned about the second and third year contracts, because once they have it, they know it's not gonna be bid out.
Right.
And they know that they can cover it because they're gonna go to 72,000 versus a 65,000. But do you feel comfortable that if they don't mow, that you have any recourse to them other than the fact that they are agreeing to the contract for that third year?
Yeah, I would say 2 things on that. It's yes, we always have an ability to terminate a contract for service issues. That said too, even if you would put in any type of agreement for a 26-27 coverage, it would have to be subject to annual appropriation by the city council. So at the time of budgeting, if there were serious concerns that were brought up, maybe with the service, it would be a discussion. We could say, well, we're not gonna put the money towards there. And then that could be our escape valve if needed, but there's always teeth in the ability to get out of a contract when it comes to these service issues.
Thank you.
All right, anybody care to make motion?
I like the idea of saving money.
Made by Mr. Jaxie, seconded by Mr. Marshall. All those in favor of pressing ahead with our contractor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Yes, sir.
I add one more. I just wanted to mention that this is for our right of way mowing, so we will try to be expanding this same approach to our park cutting as well. So it's something we're taking bits at a time, but did want to thank the Public Works team because they put in a lot of effort to quantify it. 3 square foot of grass was cut.
Great, good job.
Okay, on to administration, our deer management update.
All right. I had the most updated numbers, wanted to provide those. So the memo provided tonight was drafted on, was updated most recently on Friday. So the numbers are slightly changed. We are at 257 as of tonight, about 14.27 deer per night of operations. And then the total percent of the goal at 355 is 72.4%. Overall, we're on track to successfully get to the 355 number. So overall, things are going well. We've had there's been no calls from residents complaining. We've had a couple forms filled out that were residents a little bit upset with the program as a whole, but it's been pretty limited considering, and we've had, as mentioned at a previous meeting, over 200 residents in the NE2 and NE1 region that were being targeted, reach out to see if they could be included. We ended up being at around 35 houses that are being used. The one concern I did want to bring up tonight, first and foremost, we're doing pretty well. It's definitely reducing that deer population, but I wanted to bring up HOAs. They consistently are kind of turning us down, even when we had originally gotten, and this is taking a lot of staff time, quite frankly, to get this amount of interest, which is great. We're happy that residents are doing it, but we end up getting interest from residents that are in, specifically Garden Valley, Wild Horse, West Hampton Woods, and Highlands. We actually got told by all those HOAs, we polled our residents, we don't want to be in it. We don't want to do it. And they own the big common ground that we would need to be able to get in there and strategically remove the amount of deer that's needed and we see them. There's a ton of deer in all four of those neighborhoods. So what we did, we sent out mailers directly to the residents and said, hey, we want you to participate. You back up to an HOA common ground, but we need help convincing the HOA. We have about 25 different residents in those subdivisions listed saying that they're interested in participating. And I have encouraged them to talk with their trustee to figure out a way to get this to work. And Ryan Rhodes, who's been an excellent partner to work with White Buffalo, we consistently get emails back from the HOAs, just the same thing. We polled our residents. The items listed on the memo tonight are just a kind of a list of reasons that have been brought up over telephone calls, but in writing, typically it's we polled our residents and they're not interested in participating. And something has been reported by the residents, it's not included in the memo, that have wanted to participate, but maybe they're on an acre and a half. It's just not enough. We need that extra common ground, and we've reached out to a neighbor, can't do it. It's an almost perfect situation, but you just not close enough. They're stating that a lot of the residents, probably the reason why they're polling wrong is that, and this is all anecdotal, but they're feeding the deer. So in that case, yeah, so the resident that's feeding the deer is not gonna be necessarily in favor of coming out and having this operation take place. So that's just something I wanna be sure that we're aware of moving forward. It seems like we've got great coverage. When you look at our distribution, it's pretty dang good. But those four subdivisions make up a massive piece of NE2. And all of them are creating these little pockets where deer will remain, even if we have the access we do.
It's fault.
I know, this is word too small. Like I've had thoughts.
That's okay.
No, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off.
Oh, no, that was.
Well, okay, so I know exactly the field in the Highlands that I would just love to incorporate in this program. Couple of thoughts. One is that we did pass years ago the no feed ordinance. If this is a problem and we have a documented neighbor that's told us where the neighbor's feeding, now we start enforcing it, because we still need to teach the residents that there's a law in the books and this behavior is not gonna help the problem. My other thought is, so I've served 3 terms, and in that time, in both of those subdivisions, there's been a significant turnover of HOA individuals. So the crop that's in there now, so to speak, is not one that I have significant established relationships with because of the turnover. So the one way to be around that would be if we could be, invited to those HOA meetings and have a chance to talk directly to the subdivision. The other thing is just that more years that we demonstrate effectiveness and success and absolutely no safety incidents, the more that this might become a normal program to them and not a new tested program. So maybe what it is that we have these pockets that are left and it stinks. And we go to the other areas of the city and we revisit them in 3 to 5 years. And we're talking to completely new people and we finally get a hold of them. So my thought would be is don't give up on that section. Maybe we wait out and demonstrate to the public that this is successful. It will continue to be safe. And maybe what we can do is, have sort of like a liability release form that they feel comfortable signing. Something that tells them that we're accepting responsibility rather than just the verbal explanation of, we have insurance, White Buffalo has insurance. Because they
So-
might need that to feel better.
So for each, and I definitely agree with what all you're saying. The one thing, just to add the paper piece, White Buffalo does have an indemnity.
Indemnity, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
They provide that, they sign off, they take full liability for anything within their operation. Obviously, something happens, kid trips on the sidewalk, it's not theirs. But if it's during operations, they take full liability for that incident, up to about $3 million. So it's a decent sum. Most residents have been okay with it. And even after we bring that up, we've brought that up to one of the HOAs that were questioning the coverage, and they had said it's not enough.
It's more than their own waivers for
that-
other incidents. So I
and
mean,
that-
not waivers, but more than their own liability, yeah.
That's not why they're saying.
Yeah.
They just
that's
don't
not
take
right.
a position.
Yeah, so my
Yes.
yeah, my advice is just because the answer is no today, doesn't mean it's gonna be no in 2 years, 3
Well,
years, 5
and
years.
one positive, I can speak to 2 things that does give me a little bit of hope here for these kind of hangovers, if you will. There are the residents that have reached out to us in these subdivisions have pretty much expressed frustration with their HOA, saying, I will be attending the next HOA meeting to express the frustration, because I've had 4 residents reach out saying that the deer actually ate through their Christmas lighting, 4 different random people. So it's just random things like that. They're like, these deer are out of control. And when I do get back to them and say, hey, your HOA, unfortunately, we looked at your property through aerial records, and unfortunately, you're at about an acre. I can't operate safely on that property, but you are next to the common ground. Every time we bring that up, they go, what do I need to do? And we tell them to contact their HOA. That's when we get kind of I actually had it open, but there's like a copy paste response.
So here's my last thought is, having gone through part of Wild Horse subdivision as well. And obviously we would not want to inflame any issue with the residents, but there is a large section of the subdivision that's entirely in Ameren's property jurisdiction and right of way, and they may not feel comfortable with any activity going on near the lines, but they're also the big transmission lines. And they own the strip down the middle and the side and the front and the back, and maybe we go through a public utility.
And I think we do have coverage in that large.
Oh, okay,
We do, it's actually through another property
it is.
that
Okay.
has enough property. So
So that really wouldn't help the problem, because it's already in that area.
it's literally, and on the map, you'll see it's actually, some of the HOAs are lit up, but it's because we originally got interest, but then they, talked and they're like, yeah, we just can't do it. So that's the one thing. Overall, I would say this year has been a massive success over last year. The
Oh, yeah.
interest we've seen from residents, and the other positive piece is that the areas that we revisited in Northeast 1 that didn't get enough coverage last year, the amount of support we got from those same individuals, because they talked to their neighbors and said, wow, the number of deer that I see when I'm driving home has significantly been reduced, specifically on Panorama, Shepherd Valley, and McBride Point. All of those have seen amazing turnout of interest. So in that case, it does seem that after a year has happened and they see what's going on,
Yeah.
they see that, wow, I don't see as many deer here. They actually experience when they're driving home. And then they say, I didn't even realize they were doing the program yet, because that's how discreet they are. Typically, we've seen it at least 1 year now that we get return interest from those any one. So I think that would probably maybe be something that it's part of our agreement for next year. I mean, we're still gonna get the 355 that we're looking at, get pretty darn close to it if not, but overall, if we don't, I think what we may have to do is maybe have a piece that, like, an optional, like if we can get the access, because White Buffalo is gonna come back and say the same thing I'm saying, is that deer are somewhat localized, so if you miss pockets, you're missing
stand
out
out.
pieces of the herd. The one good thing is young bucks, after you reduce population pretty drastically, young bucks are the ones that'll typically spread out a little bit, venture off. So if you create gaps around those HOAs, the common ground being used, you will see a slight, migration from young bucks. But when it comes to does and babies and big full males, they're gonna probably stay where they are. So it's just those little pockets. So that's just something we will try next year too, to try to invite just the HOAs in wherever the target area is, and maybe just these HOAs specifically, maybe there's turnover. Sit down with them well beforehand, explain the results once we have the final report from this year, explain the results and say, hey, we are trying to do this for a public safety concern. We actually have proof that your residents want it too. It's not just a couple, it's a lot of the residents have reached out to us. But overall, it's going pretty well.
Great. Mr. Albers, got
I
anything?
was wondering if there's any documentation we could provide to residents in Ward 2 that would show the most accidents are happening in that area that might help the HOAs press
I think a
situation?
good communication plan would be really good there. The number of car accidents,
Right.
the number of the police put down on Valley, just a combination. But then the bigger one too is you can't feed the deer.
Mhm.
And the subdivisions need to know that, because I got people across the street from me, they're still feeding the deer. I got 7, but there's not enough land around my property, you got a third of an acre, but you could come in with a baseball club and take them out any day you want. I mean, they're not afraid of a gun, they just stand by your fence. But I think to communicate the plants that they eat, that kind of stuff.
Public
the-
health.
The car accidents, the cars that are hit, I mean, there's about like 10 reasons why we're doing this.
Yep.
And then send that to those people, and then I think the other one is send that to the individuals who want it, to tell them to keep pushing on their HOA. Now, they have to be officers.
Well, and that's the good thing is we do have, and we expressly put those exact reasons in the direct mailers. We sent 6 direct mailers out to targeted individuals. It was not just willy-nilly, any two. But then the other component was, we sent that information to them, the reasons, especially the car accidents. We averaged 242.5 over the last 5 years due to deer. The other component is we have all the contact info for all the residents, the over 200 that reached out this year. We kept last year's as well, which brings us to about 260. So we have all this, it's like a rotating basis of individuals that are interested. So we have that saved, and we actually have communicated with them via email. We create just a email blast to them to keep pressure on HOAs. Keep them in the Rolodex of, we know these people support deer management at some level, even if they might not let us use their property. Help people just know we're still doing the program and we're coming back wherever the area is for next year.
Mr. Jakes.
So, less than a month ago, my daughter hit a deer on Manchester, totaled the car. Thankfully, she's okay. Question related to it though is, she's a police officer in Ellisville. Did not file a report on the striking of the deer because that's not what they do in Ellisville. That there is not a requirement, or it's not even normal for them to receive deer strike reports. So how are we calculating vehicle accident? Whatever we're calculating, I'm guessing is woefully below the actual number.
Yes, and so the data is collected by the police department, first and foremost. They submit to us a report each year, and we're actually at least the department's hungrily waiting for the 2024 report, because we'll be able to kind of pinpoint potential improvements in these numbers in the NE1 region. We'll start seeing the tangible benefits, hopefully. But they have it in different categories, and then that total 242 number is just as what they can infer. That was when unreported. They have deer that were euthanized by the police. They had to go out, euthanize the animal. Deer struck that no report occurred, just based off the carcass, yes, being there. And then deer struck with a crash report. So they have 3 different ways, but that doesn't include when somebody hits it and it's just a side swipe where it's not. If the deer isn't.
They don't report it.
Exactly. If it's not reported, it's not injuring the deer to an extent where it kills it right on the road, and it's not euthanized. And then.
You answered the question though,
Yeah, we had
right?
no idea.
If they're counting carcasses and they're counting euthanizations that they perform, then we have a decent number. It's
Yeah.
not a perfect number, and I don't think it's woefully below, but we
And
have.
it's pretty
a decent
consistent
number.
each year too, which the hope is to see it drop. And
Absolutely.
if it's not, then we know in an instance, we know that hunters aren't maintaining what we've been able to shave off the top. We should see it. We're excited to get the 2024 vehicle analysis in tow.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right, review of chapter 115, article 4, city clerk.
All right, thank you, Chair. Just want to give a quick update. Obviously, as you all know, our city clerk will be departing. And in this case, just wanted to go over quickly the process. This is a little bit different than other employees that work for the city, just because it is an entity that directly reports to the council. So in this case, we're going to provide an update on that process, where we're at. First and foremost, the mayor is pursuant to section 115.230 of the municipal code. The mayor does appoint it with consent and advice from the council. So in that case, the mayor is kind of playing a critical role in getting the overall job description out, and then also will be participating in the interview process. In that case, he has the job description currently, and we are waiting for that approval. And once that's done, we will post that job. At that point, the interviews take place, and then the appointment would come up for consideration at a subsequent city council meeting. So just wanted to provide an update where we're at, but at this point, we're just waiting on the mayor, which should be, we're getting pretty close to being able to post it, and we'll start interviewing. Great.
Any reason we've waited so long?
More so to allow the current city clerk to update it, to add new things that, different responsibilities. We want to provide that time.
It just seems like a long time to fill a position. I mean, to even start.
Yes.
I don't know, I mean,
Well,
Who does, Colleen fills in the short.
that
term?
would be for this, what we're doing right now, and to add some context, sorry for not writing that. Colleen is our deputy city clerk, so right now she'll actually be attending the city council meeting next week to sit in and just participate. And from there, the day-to-day function will kind of serve through Colleen for the time being, and then we will still have this job open for all to apply.
Thanks.
All right, for action, a review of surplus stock policy.
Thank you, Chair, again. We're currently working with one of our new employees, relatively new, Dustin Howard. He has somewhat of an IT background. And we have a little bit, we had noted that we have some IT equipment that we're wanting to, a lot of it is outdated to an extent that it literally doesn't even work anymore. The screen is, we have a lot of monitors that don't plug in. But there is a little bit of not too much clarity in the actual code provision for surplus stock. That would be what that falls under. That's what kind of prompted the idea of, it doesn't, right now it's at $2,500. That is the cost at which the city administrator has the ability to pretty much get rid of a stock item. That's fine. That number doesn't necessarily need to be changed, but the problem with the actual number itself is that it doesn't state whether it's the purchase cost or if it's using something like the IRS reporting system to devalue an item over the period of time. Because like one example here is when we had our new phone system installed, we moved over to the cloud. All of our phones became obsolete overnight. That said, those phones technically are worth, when we purchased them, over $2,500. So we are still holding on to a bunch of phones because technically I don't have the authority to get rid of them. So the idea is we can keep the 2,500, but use the MACRS system that the IRS uses to calculate devaluation. But just maybe the idea tonight would be to amend the code to incorporate systems of the IRS, because that'll update, and it can be updated on January 1st of each year, to use that almost as a devalue system. Right now, we're looking to inventory everything and then provide that purchase price, but then also apply, usually it's 5 years. After 5 years, any electronic technology would go down to zero value. Office furniture, I think it's 7 years and so on. So usually that's gonna be the majority of our big items, because furniture is usually gonna be not even replaced that often, but cars would obviously come to the council for consideration. So it's just really IT equipment is becoming a little bit, there's too much of it, too much surplus stock that we have currently. So we want to amend the current surplus stock policy to allow the devalue system so we can get under that 2,500 threshold. And also there's a smart board that has been broken for about 6 years that we have upstairs too. So that's over 2,500.
All right, Nathan, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I actually was up for the last item, but
Yeah, you can go on the last one. What do you-
so if I may break rules of order for a second and just reach back to that comment real fast. So on the city clerk, is it general practice to perform like an exit interview with the person who is leaving, and then do we get any insight into what made them make that choice to depart with us? Just was
for each-
interesting. It felt like, I guess just for me being outside looking in, seems like it almost kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, so we will, as per our handbook, that we will conduct an exit interview. We can provide a follow-up report to the council. Overall, though, I can't speak on too much personnel matter right now,
Sure.
Well, I can't speak on it.
Yeah, we can, if we need to have a closed session or sometime during a council meeting, that would be interesting, but I think just feedback is always helpful.
Yes, we will get that for sure. Okay, anything on the getting rid of all the extraneous stuff policy? Mr. Marshall.
if we vote for it tonight and move it forward, can we go ahead and start getting rid of that stuff? I mean,
So-
honestly, if you would have come to the city council and say, got this old phone system we could need to get rid of, we should have done that long ago.
Well, it's not, so I want to clarify that it's not, it is taking up some space, but it's all kind of cornered into a small workstation, and it's
We're
atrocious.
never gonna use it,
We're never gonna use it.
so it should be gone.
So it should be gone. So in that case, like right now, it would say you gotta go out and find a bidder for it, and a lot of the things they just don't. We've tried to reutilize them, get them back in the rotation, but they just don't turn on.
And it won't be any better than 6 months from now either.
And they're all over 5 years old too. So in that case, it would devalue it pretty much to zero and allow us to try to bid. If we can take a record that we didn't get any bids for this, then I would be able to sign off on, hey, we will be recycling these. So in this case, we can add this pretty quickly. We could probably have it on the council agenda, but I think it would, since it's amending the code, it would technically need 2 readings of an ordinance.
But that's fine. And we talked about, I mean, last month we had it here in red. I just think that those are the kind of things that we just continuously get drugged down.
I would almost suggest get it on the agenda, assuming it passes, which I'm sure there will. Get it on the agenda for the February meeting, and I just so people have an idea.
Read it twice then.
We can, I mean, sometimes we don't usually do it, you know, we start the process, but I would also include like a spreadsheet of all of this stuff so that everybody can see it's all just
Yeah.
junk. And if there's some specific item that we need to pull out for whatever austerity's sake or whatever it is, great.
Highly doubt it, but.
Yeah, but then, and then that way you know, every year moving forward, like this is the stuff that's coming out. I mean, that's what we used to do at the old place. And then, you know, there's companies that can recycle that stuff and try to sell it or not or whatever, but we don't. It's costing us more money to store that stuff.
And there's companies that'll come in and give you a bid for it. You
Yeah.
don't have to worry about it.
That's the thing, we'll try, and we can try to do that, and if there's like the phone system, we might be able to find someone that would pay, hey, I can use the internal chip on this, whatever.
Mhm.
Those phones actually are from, actually, we had those.
1985.
Just kidding, they're pretty old, they're, I think, like 2005, but in this case, though, there are individuals that would pay for it, in some cases, but what the real kicker here would be to be able to say, okay, we didn't get any bids, we had it open for 2 weeks, we're getting rid of this, period.
I make a
We had-
motion.
Motion by Mr. Marshall, seconded by Ms. Nyan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Nathan, I assume you're for that? Great. Opioid settlement funds.
Sorry, 1 second. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Wanted to provide an update on the opioid settlement funds that the city has been participating in. This is something that originally we thought was gonna be a smaller payout, something we kind of inherited. But it seems like we're going to be getting like a small little allocation of money each year. We, back in 2021, decided, I think it was, what happened was the state, along with the entire United States, like every DA and every state attorney went out and sued all these pharmaceutical companies that created opioids. They then reached out to all their subsidiaries and said, hey, please participate in this program, this settlement, if you will. And the city of Wildwood, along with, you know, Town and Country, there's others in the area that also jumped into the mix. It was before my time, but we did. And in this case, the settlement ended up going through and we started receiving payments last year. The problem with, you know, if it's just adding it to the general fund, great. You know, it's $24,000 that we received last year and we can expect to receive anywhere between $3,000 to about $15,000 per year annually over the next till 2038. So just random distributions from different providers, but they have to be spent on addressing the opioid crisis, abatement. It's called opioid abatement. So we've been trying to figure out, and something that's been a little bit tedious is that the state has not been giving us too much clarity. That's why it's been sitting on the agenda as a future agenda item for quite some time. We do believe that utilizing the money with the county, police and the fire district that do some type of education training for the fire department and the police, one problem that we have there is that they do always, at least our police departments say that they have quite a bit of training in that stuff. So it's not something that they might necessarily need all the time, but they wouldn't turn it down. They also have a DEA education expert that could go to schools. There's a couple different programs we could potentially utilize. But quite honestly, the city doesn't have really the resources and the wherewithal to know how to best use these funds. And for individuals that may be struggling with this or families that are struggling with this, we want to make sure it's actually put to the best use. So we're, at least the departments, after reviewing it, the 2 options that we're thinking about is utilizing it for some type of programming through the St. Louis County Police or the fire district, or to return it back to the state that literally runs quite a few programs that helps treat these individuals that might be afflicted with this type of use.
Can I make a suggestion? Why don't we just buy a bunch of Narcan?
We already, we asked that, the police already have enough, and
I mean, for anybody that wants it.
just have an Narcan.
If you're a resident of Wildwood, come on up and get some Narcan.
That is, that is an allowable expense, so we could do that.
I mean, it's,
Even if you did it at a anniversary date, or you do it at a concert some night,
Yeah.
just set up a table
Yep.
and explain to people. Well, cause honestly, when you go to the fire department, you got 3 fire departments. You go to the police department, it goes back to the county, you may never see it. I think anything you could do to get it, just to create awareness.
I think that, I mean, it's crazy that.
I
we
would
have-
not get it back to the state.
No, but I mean, to me, it's crazy that we should have to have something like this around, but it's an unfortunate reality that, you know, people take things, we don't know what, they don't know what bad things happen. Let's buy them a bunch of Narcan, lasts for 2 to 3 years. Give it to whoever needs it.
Have we asked the local schools if they need?
Yeah, I mean, whatever.
That is something that we have asked, but that we have not got information from the state if it would be an eligible. The thing we've been trying and quite afraid to do is spend any of this money, we could buy Narcan, that actually, I can confirm that. But if for these like more soft costs of like training and education programs, they never confirm with 100% accuracy, yep, you can use that for that expense. And if they identify that it's not part of the abatement, this categorization, then you have to pay it back with your own funds. So we've been very,
I would say if we can use Narcan, and we know that, and we can offer it for free to our citizens that come to our events. That to me seems like the best use for this stuff, that the police can educate.
Unless it's super cheap and $22,000 buys us so much Narcan, we can treat
I mean,
everybody.
it's $50
Does it expire?
in 2 to 3 years.
But I mean, you could buy a couple $1,000s worth and see how it goes and
Yeah.
then go back.
Yeah.
that's what we would
Yeah.
probably,
Yeah, pilot program. All right, so do you need a motion?
motion to use it on Narcan and keep exploring other options.
Anybody care to make that?
Does it matter if the wording of it, it needs to be like the official drug compound name? Because Narcan is the drug and I think a brand, but there could be
Yeah.
like theoretically another generic that hits the market
Narcan
or
or
another
similar.
competitor, yeah, or
Yeah, let's
similar.
add that in.
Nalox, yeah,
Naloxone.
I would word that very carefully. so
Would
that
there
you're
be
not-
a
That's a very,
age limit, age requirement on that or?
I mean, I don't think we want to give it to 8-year-olds, but
Well, that's what I'm just.
Yeah, is the city taking on any liability?
Card them.
yeah, I mean,
providing Narcan to, I would say we probably want to just keep it to people over the age of 18.
Yep.
Maybe that is a small condition that we would give, we would purchase Narcan for general distribution to our residents, and they would only be given to residents that are over the age of 18. And they would show their ID card, show their ID card, and we would be able to check their address.
Not to be difficult, but who would be giving it?
We would be able to give this out at really concerts or just put it on our website if you would like.
So a city employee would have to do that.
Yep,
Give it up from the.
It would be
give
at
out
the-
from the.
it could be at the front desk if we wanted to
They
have
can
it
come to
up
the
there.
police department to get it.
Yeah, right.
We do have Narcan, not only the police, but we do have Narcan as well in case something happens here.
Throw it
at
out
City
at the
Hall.
parade.
But
Like,
we can have it pretty much at the front desk, and if,
Take it to those HOA meetings.
I would say that, I wanna almost check the cost of it though, cause if we get $24,000 worth of Narcan, then that would be.
No, I mean, it's like $50 for.
Okay, so that's actually, that seems like a value. People, I could see people adding that to their repertoire if they know, that would also give them a reason to come to visit City Hall. We can give out a small amount of them at city events.
If anybody
thing-
that ever knows somebody's had a problem,
Yeah.
they'd be all over it.
I mean, yeah, the sad thing is, you don't even have to know people. You could be at the grocery store and
Yep.
find somebody in the bathroom.
And I assume you would not have to prove you're a city resident. Cause
No,
like if you're
that's-
doing it at the concerts or something, it could be.
Yeah, well, the idea was to check the
that's what I'm-
ID, but honestly, if we wanna be as a city,
They be a city resident.
we could make, I mean, that would be up to the committee.
Ideally, yes, but I don't mean, I think if somebody
Well,
comes
that's
up
what
and
I'm
asks
saying,
for it, I
somebody
think
takes the time to come and get it.
they're like hot dogs.
I feel
We'll
like
give them
they
hot dogs.
know.
Yeah.
Well, and if there was ever an
Not gonna
emergency,
do
the
that.
police would distribute that life-saving drug. But if, say, we, like I was just saying, we have Narcan actually here if we need it, someone were to come in and there was an incident, but yeah, we could, that doesn't seem to be an issue. I think the next step would be pricing it out and then having something kind of posted on our website, just let people know that.
I think the police would help with that. They could even use what's the training, the young people that are,
That-
They don't do it anymore.
They don't do.
no, I meant,
They don't do dare anymore?
no, they have the junior, don't they have a junior police officer?
They
thing?
do have like a they have like this other program too, where it's like drug awareness and whatnot, but that was the one that we actually sent specifically to the state. And they were like wishy-washy on whether or not it was approved because it wasn't
I
just
asked them, they
addressing.
may have
opioid.
ways to do it too, but I thought they had some.
Sorry, not to be difficult, 22,000 divided by 50. I'm using my calculator again. It's your fault. That's 440 cans of Narcan. Is that what we're talking about? Otherwise, do we need to give them guidance for?
Well, so I was saying that we would
Do a pilot program.
do a pilot program to see if the Narcan could be something consistent. I mean, I really hope we
So
don't need.
you don't
to
need
use that much.
additional guidance for the rest of the
Additional
funds?
guidance would be that would help spend some of it. The other amount could be used to continue working with our police. But I think police are probably the best partners for it, just we haven't gotten concrete evidence of what programs could be used and be approved. So I guess, could we come back after we get pricing for Narcan? Well, Naxalone?
Yeah, and I would ask St. Louis County Public Health Department, because they probably have the programs as public health officials that police would be using. I would
Works for me.
think. Yeah,
Alright.
Prevention and cessation.
Amy, you good on what we're talking about? Okay. Does anybody care to make the motion for our opioid plan? Made by Mr. Jaxi, seconded by Mr. Marshall. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Last but not least, we have the review of the background check policy. Do you want me to do it since I talked to Megan about it?
Yeah, I kind of add a note on it first. I don't think we should change this policy at all.
Yeah, that was not,
Yeah, I know.
At all
I know it
intent.
wasn't your intent either. I just wanted to double down that,
6 months, right?
yeah.
so the question that Megan asked was, there has been a level of confusion with if someone is appointed to a position, a board or whatever, they have a background check run. If they're reappointed, the question was, do they need to have another background check run? And my response was yes, but I thought I would bring it to the group because the idea is,
Yeah.
the policy is if you're appointed, you get a background check. So appointed, reappointed, it's the same thing. You just get a background check.
You can commit a new crime in
Yeah.
between there,
That's-
absolutely.
That's the
Do it
thing,
again.
is, within
Yeah.
6 months, things change, and this is
Never
something
here.
that the city does to protect itself, and,
Here,
you know,
really
it's our, there's official decisions being made, it just, you don't want anything crazy to happen.
So so the clarity then would be the policy as it stands, whether regardless of if you are being appointed or reappointed, the timeframes, everything in
Yep.
there, that it's just what it is. There's no vagueness to the
An
direction.
official appointment, no matter what, you are getting a background check again,
The cost of doing business.
cost of doing
essentially.
business.
The other question I guess I was gonna ask with this was, right now, we have the St. Louis County Police do this.
Mhm.
In my previous roles, I've had outside companies do it that do, and perhaps cast a little wider net as to what is going on. Do we want to offer any suggestion as to whether to have the police still do that? Or to go to an outside company? My other thought was I think it was in Baldwin, they ran into a little bit of an issue with this, and I don't really want to get involved in that kind of an issue. It would probably mean a small level of an expense to the city, but it takes the
Yeah.
conversation.
Police is fine.
My 2 cents, I let our police do it, because they're not doing a report, they're just running through.
They just
It's the
let us
very
know
same
yes
thing
or
they
no.
do for the liquor license, right? I mean, they do the very same thing when somebody
And
comes in to
solicitors.
apply for it. So I used to buy those for all over the world for people, but it was 75, 150 euros, so it gets expensive. And a lot of this stuff you can't prove anyway, so I think using our local people and no big paperwork would be a smart way.
All right, so then the policy is what it is. Do you need a motion to say that, or you?
No motions necessary. If we want to do an endorsement of the current policy, I think that I can then reference in the, hey, we just spoke with us and we endorsed it again,
I
but.
kind of feel like you can probably just say that.
Yeah.
Cool. Great.
Sounds good.
All right, with that, that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. If anybody would care, make a motion to adjourn. Mr. Albert makes the motion. Anybody second? Tracy seconds it. Non-debatable. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No.